Once again, the great team at DNAinfo New York has put together a smorgasbord of reports for our viewers. The stories ahead have something in common. They all touch on the city residents' role in a crowded, diverse society. There's some new news for us, too. Namely, could it turn out the mayor's Vision Zero plan has legal problems?
And there are the latest developments in some stories we've touched on here at BK Live, like the future of city street fairs and the final decision on whether specially segregated hours for public pools will be permitted to stand. Right now, we want to welcome our three DNAinfo New York reporters. Nicole Levy, great to have you here.
Pleasure.
Gwynne Hogan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And of course, Aidan Gardiner, welcome to BK Live, and thanks. Good to have you here.
And those stories you mentioned, just a few of the ones that you guys are working on, the city's following. Obviously, one developing as we speak is the what's being called the road rage NYPD shooting, where I think you were bylined on a story about that being perhaps the first case where the Attorney General will use his new power to investigate. Yeah,
I'm not sure if it's actually the first case. I'll have to find out more about that. But he definitely is, and it's obviously taking it very seriously, and it's I think a lot of eyes are on it, and we want to see how that all shakes out.
What do we, I mean, obviously we know a little bit about what happened. What do you think the kind of major questions to be answered in the case are at this point?
There's some, people are very curious why the police officer didn't de-escalate the situation. I think Charles Barron was out, and he was saying, why didn't the officer roll up his window and drive away? So a lot of people are asking that question, and that's unclear. The officer hasn't spoken publicly yet, and the main line out of the NYPD is that we have to wait and see how this investigation turns out. And I'm sure that Mr. Schneiderman will be looking at that.
Well, I thought it was just a very interesting case thus far. But the fact that the Attorney General is weighing in on it, you know, even though the gentleman, like I said, is unarmed, but he's an off-duty cop. Does that make a difference whether the cop is on duty or not?
I don't think so. Again, I'm not totally well-versed in that aspect of it. I mean, it's still a use of deadly force with a department weapon. So I think that is that's the line. And
right.
That's why.
Which they are, off-duty cops, I think, are obligated to carry a weapon, except when they're like swimming or drinking, so they have to have it on them all the time, which is...
Well, speaking of swimming, we'll leave the drinking part out right now.
Nice
so there's
segue.
been a lot of controversy surrounding the pools in Williamsburg. So, Gwynne?
Yeah, there's been an issue about a women-only swimming hour. It's about 8 hours out of 50 hours at this public pool, the Metropolitan Recreation Center. It's been going on since the 90s, but it mainly caters to the area's Hasidic women. And recently, the city's Human Rights Commission started investigating it because of an anonymous tip. And it turns out that it was in violation of the city's own civil rights law because it's based on gender discrimination. And so the Parks Department tried to get rid of the policy secretly, and then there was...
secretly?
Well, there was. They took it quietly. I'm sorry. Publicly, but they didn't make any announcement. They just took it off the schedule, and the women who used the swimming hours were really upset, and they reached out to State Assemblyman Dov Hikind, and he sort of raised a stink about it, and they reinstated the policy, saying it was just a scheduling error. But what's happening now is that the Parks Department and the Human Rights Commission are investigating it. So in the next week or two, we're expecting to hear whether or not that policy will stay.
So they're investigating this right in the middle of summer?
Yes, yeah. It's an indoor pool. I don't know if that changes anything, but
it's always summer in there. But your article on this, I think, did a great job of kind of looking at the two sides, and a lot of it is about the fact that this pool's a lot more crowded than it used to be, right? There's a lot more use, and so the folks who want to have these modesty hours, whatever they're called, their argument is, look, it's 2 hours a day, it's 8 hours a week out of 90 hours, it's open. What's the big deal? And the other side is like, we need the pool for that time, right?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, a lot of people were quick to say, oh, this is gentrifiers saying something about the traditions of this neighborhood. But a lot of the swimmers who are against the only women hours have been using the pool for decades, too. And it's just they feel like that in the past couple of years, it's gotten to an extreme in a lot of different ways. It's not just the hours that are set aside for these women. There are other special concessions.
Any talk I didn't see anything, but is there any talk of maybe building more pools? I mean, you know, like they were saying, the population of the of the area has tripled in the last two decades.
That's a good question. I don't know.
At no point was anybody saying anything about a new pool, unless it's on top of a hotel, maybe. But
at the Metropolitan Pool are saying if you want these special rules during your swimming hour, you should build your own pool. So they're saying that the Hasidic community,
No, what I like to do after swimming in a pool in New York City is go to a street fair, because I love to. I got to get my tube socks and my lemonade. But there have been some changes meant to address what was widespread outcry over the incredible boringness of street fairs. And you did a story looking at how those have progressed so far. What's the latest on that?
Well, the man behind that is named Evan Berman, and he is the nephew of Todd Berman, who is the owner of a business called Clearview Productions. And Clearview Productions is one of 3 production companies that produces all the street fairs you see. They're part of the reason that they all look so uniform. But Evan Berman's idea is, let's redo it. Let's make this artisanal. Let's make it upscale, and let's introduce vendors who are trying to make it at other outlets like Smorgasburg. So what we're seeing are vendors selling items like knockoff cronuts and Japanese octopus fritters and new artisanal soaps, products like that.
I can't believe those are knockoffs. They tasted.
Well, when I first got to New York, X amount of years ago, you'd like, oh, it's a street fair, and then you start realizing they're all sort of, we're very similar in nature. So I think this is something that's definitely been needed. What do you say to the fact that this gentleman that is sort of bringing about this new form of street festivals is also related and associated with, one of the same companies that have been running it for 4 decades? Is there ever an opportunity for new life and new sort of movers and shakers to enter into this system?
Well, I think that's not going to happen until the city lifts a cap on permits for street fairs, and those are given out by the Office of Citywide Event Coordination and Management. They are currently looking into the advantages and disadvantages of street fairs as they are now, and they, I think, are considering lifting the cap. So once that happens, other people can apply for new permits, and we may see a proliferation of all kinds of events.
Well, one thing I really liked about it is just the use of the space. They were saying that instead of just jamming it with vendor, they put tables out and actually had places for games and made it more of a sort of welcoming, sort of relaxed environment. So,
yeah. A story that I didn't pay nearly enough attention to was this decision regarding the mayor's Vision Zero plan and the fact that, among other things, it might be unconstitutional. That sounds very exciting. Can you explain what that's about?
Yeah, certainly. It was another quiet instance, I suppose. Many people didn't notice it at first, but late last month, a judge in Queens was deciding a case involving a bus operator who fatally struck an elderly woman. And she, at question, was this new Vision Zero misdemeanor, failure to yield with due care. And she said, this judge, she said that it was actually unconstitutional, and this driver cannot be charged with that because it violates his 5th and 14th Amendment rights to due process. And there have been a couple other judges who have weighed in on this, but she was the first to say that this cannot be applied.
And the nut of it is that it puts the onus on the defendant to prove that they were in the right, as opposed to the other way, which is how it normally works. You can prove they were
presumption
wrong.
of innocence, which we all learned about at school. Yeah, that little thing.
So this is a judge in Queens. I don't know how precedent works in that arena. Does that then apply to other convictions under this law, or?
I don't know if it can overturn prior convictions, but what will be interesting to see going forward is how many other judges, if any other judges, will look to her logic and her decision and decide to go that same route. Right now, the Queens DA, or last I heard, the Queens DA is weighing their options on whether they want to appeal that decision. So they could push it back potentially in appellate courts. But what will be interesting to see, and I think a lot of traffic safety advocates are concerned about, is other judges saying, "Oh, she did it." Yeah, clearly it doesn't apply here as well.
Well, since this decision was handed down by a Supreme Court Queens Supreme Court Justice Gia Morris is her name. But what has been the sort of response from the de Blasio administration at this point?
They said this is terrible. Vision Zero is very important. It's what keeps our streets safe. They're echoing the calls of many other traffic safety advocates like Transportation Alternatives who have said similar things, but then there are the Transit Workers United, or Transportation Workers United, the bus drivers union, and they've long been against Vision Zero, pretty much since the beginning, and they led a huge campaign against it. And so they came out and said, this is great, we love this, it's fantastic. This judge is finally seeing what we've been saying all along. So it's sort of mixed, and it's along the same lines that you'd sort of expect. The advocates hate this decision. The people who hate the law hate.
Well, how effective? I don't know if you have the numbers right offhand, but how effective has Vision Zero been in the last 2 to 3 years since its inception?
I think it's kind of hard to measure like its ultimate effectiveness. I mean, the ultimate goal is 0 deaths on the streets, and clearly that has not occurred. I mean, each and every week we see some sort of traffic-related injury or fatality. But I think if you ask the de Blasio administration, they'd say it's a long road. There's a lot of steps we can take. But what we have noticed at DNAinfo is that police were sort of reticent to use the Vision Zero misdemeanor laws, and only like 15% of all fatal crashes were ever charged with Vision Zero. So that can sort of indicate how effective it's being, and also how it's being used, which is very low. But also, in our recent news, the NYPD has actually ramped up. They're applying it more often, so they're using it more, and this judge is sort of slapping it down. It's going to create an interesting tension.
Speaking of tension, I mean, Vision Zero is part of, I think, kind of a web of stories where Mayor de Blasio's popularity has been taking some dents recently. I'm wondering, in your respective beats, we know about the kind of big stories of the investigations and allegations of that nature, but in your reporting, are you finding people sort of souring on the mayor? Are people turning against him? In the neighborhoods you cover, the stories you do, is de Blasio's name sort of getting associated with mud, or are people generally still supportive of him?
I think in the neighborhood I cover, one really big thing happened that people got back on his side. The Bushwick Inlet Park, it's the last portion of this piece of land that the city needs to complete in order to finish a 30-acre park on the waterfront that it promised during the rezoning in 2005. And finally, de Blasio offered $100 million for the property, which is a lowball offer, a lot of people are saying. But it sort of shows that he's willing to step up, and I think a lot of people in North Brooklyn were really happy about that.
Well, speaking of the people in North Brooklyn, I have to tell you, this impending M train and L train, or as we refer to it as the L-pocalypse and hashtag M train problems. I don't even understand how this city how do you make it through something of such a Herculean effort?
Yeah, and there's a hearing on that this week, right?
Thursday. Yeah. I'm going to get to see the PowerPoint for like the 50,000th time. I can't wait.
Do you bring popcorn for the good parts?
So you've been to these hearings before.
Yeah.
What is the I don't know, the tension in the room like? If I went to go speak to a representative, the only thing I'm going there to say is, you can't shut my train down. Like, I don't want to hear anything else. You can't, and I would just say it over and over again, over and over again.
And that'd be very effective.
I think they've been different because they've gone to all these different communities along the L train line. I went to one in Canarsie, it must have been about a month ago, and that was really fascinating because the main job that the MTA was trying to do was to convince people that the whole L train wasn't shutting down. Like, everybody in the room that I talked to before was like, what am I going to do? The L train is not going to run. But there was a big misconception because of the way that the news was leaked and how they sort of didn't say anything for months and months, that
we have
actually
people
the
tuning
whole
in
line,
right now. So as it is
the
right
L
now,
train is not shutting down completely. It's just service between Manhattan and Brooklyn, either for 1.5 years or 3 years. So it's interesting to see how different communities along the line are reacting to the news.
So just to go Reporters Roundtable for a second, I don't know about you, but the summer still feels like kind of a slow period in city news, at least from my vantage point, but you don't look like it's been especially slow. What are you guys working on now? What should we be looking on DNAinfo for in the next week or two?
I mean, over this weekend, I mean, there were so many incidents of violence, you know, shootings here. I mean, there was 7 people were shot at a barbecue in East New York. So it may appear slow, but the city is very much still doing stuff, and yeah, we're gonna send reporters to as many scenes as we can to get you what's going on out there.
Nicole?
We're doing a roundup of story time so that you can take your kid to your local Brooklyn Public Library and spend some time with them, and get them caught up on the reading before school starts. And
there's been so many different articles going around lately, just really praising just how wonderful the New York City libraries have become. So far as like digital beacons, using as cooling centers, community centers, and things like that. So, yeah, please, by all means, take your children to the library.
And this meeting Thursday, where and when for folks who want to go?
It's in Bushwick. I need to double check the name of it. It's at a school, IS 283, I believe. Doors open at 5:30.
We can check DNA.
But yeah, let's double check that. But yeah, it's going to be another lovely presentation from the MTA.
Shut down my train. You can't shut down my train. Well, thank you all for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.